Of the press conference, we will begin with the spokesperson of the National Task Force, followed by the spokesperson of the Philippine Navy, followed by the spokesperson of the Philippine Coast Guard, and then the spokesperson of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. And then lastly, we have the spokesperson of the Department of Foreign Affairs. We shall now begin.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning to all of the members of the media. And we thank you for coming to this press conference, called by the National Task Force West Philippine Sea, led by Secretary Eduardo Año, the National Security Advisor. China's latest unprovoked act of coercion and dangerous maneuvers against a legitimate and routine rotation and resupply mission to WION Shoal in the West Philippine Sea have put the lives of our people at risk and caused actual injury to Filipinos on board the supply ship Onaisa May 4. The systematic and consistent manner in which the People's Republic of China carries out these illegal and irresponsible actions completely negate any of its calls for peaceful dialogue and the escalation of tensions in the West Philippine Sea. Once again, the spokesman of the Chinese Coast Guard, in its statement of March 5, referred to an alleged quote-unquote promise by the Philippines regarding BRP Sierra Madre, a claim that has not been supported by any shred of credible evidence and has been debunked a million times. In Filipino, we refer to this as sirang plaka. Paulit-ulit, wala namang naniniwala sa kanila. The Chinese Coast Guard referred to its actions at sea as, and I quote, reasonable, legal, and professional. They also claimed that a Philippine Coast Guard vessel, and I quote, deliberately crashed into the normal law enforcement of the Chinese Coast Guard boat 21555 in an unprofessional and dangerous way, resulting in a slight scratch, and the responsibility was completely on the Philippines. And I quote, deliberately crashed into the normal law enforcement of the Chinese Coast Guard boat 21555 in an unprofessional and dangerous way, resulting in a slight scratch, and the responsibility was completely on the Philippines. End of quote. This is standard Chinese disinformation and fake news. As we can see from footage of the incidents yesterday, coming from third-party and independent members of the domestic and international media, including footages which will be shared to you today by the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard. The Chinese Coast Guard conducted provocative, unilateral, illegal, and unprofessional acts that is conduct unbecoming of a Coast Guard officer and is a stain on the Coast Guard uniform we proudly wear. We hold the Chinese Coast Guard responsible for their actions. The Chinese Coast Guard further claims that the Philippines is, and I quote, untrustful, deliberately stirring up trouble, and maliciously inciting hype. Let me ask them this question. Who is executing the blocking and dangerous maneuvers? Who is deploying water cannons against unarmed ships? Is hurting or causing injury to Filipino personnel professional and legitimate? Who is deliberately blocking our ships in waters where the Philippines exercises sovereign rights and jurisdiction under international law? Is it the Philippines? No, it is China. It is a China that is deliberately stirring up trouble and maliciously inciting hype, and not the Philippines. We wish to remind the Chinese Coast Guard that when it points a finger at others, there are 3 other fingers pointing back at them. I remember an old proverb that states, before you start pointing fingers, make sure your hands are clean. The Philippines, for its part, continues to act peacefully and responsibly, consistent with international law, particularly UNCLOS and the legally binding 2016 Arbitral Award. Peace and stability cannot be achieved without due regard for the legitimate, well-established, and legally settled rights of others. If the hope of China is to weaken the Philippine resolve, they will be sorely disappointed, because we will never be deterred from exercising our legal rights over our maritime zones, including WION Shoal, which forms part of our EEZ and continental shelf. During the Chinese New Year last month, China said that the Philippines should work with China to steer the right course and bring back bilateral relations on the right track as soon as possible. It also called on the Philippines to meet China halfway and manage maritime disputes properly through dialogue and consultation. In response, we also share China's aspirations, but we demand that they match their words with actions. In order to manage the maritime disputes properly, they must first stop their harassment and bullying of legitimate Philippine operations. That is the primary reason for the increase of tensions in the West Philippine Sea. They must stop hurting our Filipino personnel who are just doing their jobs in accordance with international law, without which their call for resolving the maritime differences properly will amount to nothing but empty words and unfulfilled promises. The South China Sea is wide enough for both our nations to peacefully coexist as we have done for centuries. As President Ferdinand Marcos has said, and I quote, "The foundation of strong bilateral relations with China is mutual respect, cooperation, and mutual benefit." Maraming salamat po. MC?
Next presenter. Let's open the stage for the spokesperson of the Philippine Navy, Commodore Roy Vincent Trinidad.
My presentation is already part of the AFP presentation. I just come in the Q&A.
Netflix na, Netflix.
So magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. From the Armed Forces of the Philippines, speaking for our Chief of Staff. Today I'll be presenting the situation update on the rotation and reprovision mission at WION Shoal from 04 to 06 March of 2024. So this is the statement of the AFP from the words of our Chief of Staff, General Romeo S. Browner Jr. The Armed Forces of the Philippines strongly condemns the China Coast Guards and the Chinese maritime militia's latest excessive and unlawful actions against Philippine vessels conducting our, take note, routine rotation and resupply mission of our troops in BRP Sierra Madre at WION Shoal on March 5. We call on the China Coast Guard to act with prudence and be responsible in their actions to prevent miscalculations and accidents that will endanger our people's lives. The AFP commits to sustaining our military forces deployed in the West Philippine Sea and maintaining the Philippine presence in our exclusive economic zone. We'd like to give you the details in terms of the RORE mission. For our primary vessels, we have Oneida May 1, Oneida May 4, and for our supporting vessels, we have the BRP Gregorio del Pilar, PS-15, BRP Ramon Alcaraz, PS-16, BRP Sindangan, MRRV 4407, and BRP Cabra, MRRV 4409. In terms of the Chinese monitored vessels, we have from the PLA Navy, 3 vessels with bow numbers 648, 172, and 530 respectively. From the Chinese Coast Guard, we have monitored 5, 5201, 3305, 21555, 21556, and 21551. And for the Chinese maritime militia or the Chinese fishing vessels, we have monitored 18. We'd like to take note that the commander of WESCOM was actually on board during the RORE mission. In terms of the significant events or the incidents during the RORE mission at LS-57 in WION Shoal from the period 4 to 6 March 2024. On 04 March 2024 on Monday, at 04:10, the UM-1 and UM-4 departed from the station. And on 05 March of 2024, Tuesday, at 0326, there were several radio challenges from the Chinese Coast Guard that occurred. On 0505, the response from our end, from BRP Cabra, was to China Coast Guard. This is PSG vessel BRP Cabra 4409 conducting routine maritime patrol within the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. We are proceeding to our planned route. Stay clear to our passage in accordance to collision regulations. And at 5:48, same day, the UM-4 was blocked by 4 CCGs and 3 Chinese fishing vessels accordingly. On 05 March still, at 8:15, Chinese Coast Guard 5201 and Chinese Coast Guard 21551, they performed water cannon on 0M4 and 4 personnel from our end incurred minor injuries. At 8:23, the UM-1 successfully crossed the NE entrance. And at 8:40, MRRV 4407 provided medical assistance to the injured personnel as stated. At 8:42, the UM-1 safely arrived and moored at starboard side of LS-57. At 9:36 hotel, UM-4 and BRP Sindangan, MRRV 4407, in convoy, departed towards Puerto Princesa City in Palawan. And at 10:56, UM-1 departed LS-57 and rode back to Palawan. These are photos of the scene in the area. Actual photos during the blocking and the dangerous maneuver executed by multiple Chinese vessels, including 2 Chinese Coast Guards, BN 21551 and BN 3305 towards UM-4. So note how they have encircled our vessel. This is another photo. The actual photos during the blocking and dangerous maneuver executed by multiple Chinese vessels, including 2 CCGs, BN 21551 and BN 3305 towards UM-4. So as you can see, their maneuvers, they're circling our vessel accordingly. This is also the actual photo of the water cannoning incident. The actual photos of two Chinese Coast Guard BN 5201 and BN 21551, which doused their water cannon and near collision against UM4. This is another photo of an ISA May 4 in the middle and a Philippine Coast Guard vessel at the right as they are being blocked by Chinese Coast Guard and maritime militia vessels during its rotation and reprovisioning mission to BRP Sierra Madre LS-57 at the WION Shoal on March 5. This is the actual photo of two Chinese Coast Guards, BN 5201 and BN 21551, who doused their water cannon on near collision against UM4. So nakita po natin, no, sobrang lapit na po ito. So you can just imagine how much pressure was really given to our vessel. A Chinese Coast Guard vessel deployed at around 8:15 a.m. and its water cannon on a NISA May 4 during its rotation and reprovisioning mission to BRP Sierra Madre at the WION Shoal on March 5. This is a video which shows our personnel which are on water cannon at around 8:15 a.m. during the rotation and provisioning. So dito po natin makikita how our windshield broke with the pressure of their water cannon. So makita niyo po, no, pumasok po yung water and it's also damaged CCTV cameras inside our vessel. This is the photo that shows the extent of the damage. So this is the broken glass as shown, caused by the Chinese Coast Guard vessel's water cannon towards NISA May 4 during the said mission. Again, the photos show that it's not just our windshield that was damaged. There are also certain damages that were incurred by the vessel. The sustained damage of UM4 due to the water pressure exerted by the water cannon from CCG 21551 and CCG 5201. So dalawa po yun na sabay pong water cannon sa ating vessel. This is another video that shows personnel on board on NISA May 4 when a Chinese Coast Guard vessel deployed its water cannon at around 8:15 a.m. So ito po makikita niyo po how much pressure was really incurred by our vessel. So there's a very close range na po ito. And this is another video that shows how the two Chinese Coast Guard vessels simultaneously sprayed water cannon to NISA May 4 at around 8:15 a.m. So ito po, dalawa na po ito, no, on both ends. So kita nyo po, NISA May 4 in the middle, almost being blocked by the water from both ends. So that's about it po for the updates in terms of the Armed Forces of the Philippines. Maraming salamat po.
Next will be the presentation from the spokesperson from the Philippine Coast Guard, Coast Guard Commodore J. Tristan Tariel.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. I would like to apologize dahil nasira po ang kuryente namin. Sa dinami-dami naman ng panahon, ngayon pa talaga. Kaya po mainit tayo ngayon. Nag-volunteer pa naman ako na ako ang mag-host ng ating press conference. And ganito ang naging katapos-tapusan. Again, I would like to thank our media friends for attending this press conference. To proceed with my presentation, I would like to highlight the fact that the role of the Philippine Coast Guard in this resupply mission is only to support the operation of the armed forces of the Philippines. The RORE mission is a mission for the armed forces of the Philippines. In short, it's a military operation. Our role is only to support those supply boats that they're using to conduct the resupply operation. On the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we deployed 2 Coast Guard vessels, 44-meter, BRP Sindangan, MRB 4407, BRP Cabra, MRB 4409, and then there are supply boats that they are tasked to escort are Onaiza May 1 and Onaiza May 4. Just at least to give you an idea of the operational area of this resupply operation, the Philippine Coast Guard vessels came from Buliluyan Port. That's Point C. That's the southernmost part of Palawan. And then the supply boats, it came from Ulugan Bay. So the concept of operation is that the Philippine Coast Guard vessel and Onaiza May will rendezvous at Point B, which is Sabina Shoal. From Sabina Shoal, with a total distance of around 40 nautical miles, we're going to sail going west through Ayungin Shoal. The Philippine Coast Guard vessels departed last March 4, 12:40 p.m., hoping that the following day we can be able to have to rendezvous the Onaiza May in Sabina Shoal. On our way going to Sabina Shoal, the Philippine Coast Guard vessel was able to monitor the presence of a PLA Navy helicopter with a tail number 36. It is important for us to note that this helicopter are also those helicopters that we see in Bajo de Masinloc whenever we patrol that area. So we know for a fact that this is a PLA Navy helicopter. The Philippine Coast Guard vessels and resupply boats arrived at Ayungin Shoal around 2 a.m. And then slowly we went to sail moving towards Ayungin Shoal. As early as 3 a.m., unfortunately we don't have photos and images to show you, but as early as 3 a.m., the Chinese Coast Guard vessels started shadowing the entire supply contingent. And by 5:55 is the only photo that we have during that time, wherein the Chinese Coast Guard vessel 21551 and the Chinese Maritime Militia supported each other to prevent Onaiza May 4 from advancing, moving towards Ayungin Shoal. At 5:40 in the morning, we also monitored another Chinese Coast Guard vessels, China Coast Guard vessel 3305 and 2155. They are shadowing MRB 4409 from a certain distance. Sorry. At 6:05 in the morning, at a distance of 13 nautical miles east of Ayungin Shoal, China Coast Guard vessel 3305 blocked MRB 4409 at a distance of only 100 yards. So basically, just like the way that how they have been doing in the past, they're going to block our pathway. They're going to stop all their engines and appear that they're just staying there so that there's a possibility that for the Philippine Coast Guard to collide towards their vessel. And right after this, a few hours after this, we'll be we will be having a collision with another Chinese Coast Guard vessel. At 6:05 in the morning, 3 Chinese maritime militia vessel and Chinese Coast Guard vessel 21556 blocked and shadowed Unai-Zamay 1. You can see how many Chinese maritime militias are being deployed for them to prevent the Philippine government in advancing, moving towards Ayungin Shoal. This is another video showing Chinese maritime militia vessel blocking MRB 4409. And also disregarding coal rigs because this vessel did not consider the fact that she is actually closing the bow of MRB 4409. At 6:19 in the morning, Chinese Coast Guard vessel conducted close maneuver towards MRB 4409. You can just imagine how big this Coast Guard vessel is, and doing such maneuver can actually endanger the safety of the MRB 4409. Just to support the images that were shown a while ago by Ma'am Padilla, that the Unai-Zamay were also shadowed by Chinese maritime militia and the Chinese Coast Guard vessel. It goes to show that it's not just the Philippine Coast Guard that they are blocking, but even the resupply boats to prevent us from carrying out a successful resupply operation. At 6:32 in the morning, that's what we have been warning the Chinese Coast Guard for so many months already, that they need to abide with the provisions of the collision regulation. If not, there is a high possibility that collision incident might happen. And in this particular incident, because we have always ensured the seamanship skills of our commanding officer in deploying our vessels in Palawan, particularly in carrying out resupply operations, that he has prevented the impact of collision towards the Chinese Coast Guard 21555. Here is another video taken from the vessel. You can see that the Philippine Coast Guard personnel are really doing so much effort to prevent the collision towards the vessel. And the Chinese Coast Guard personnel are just standing there and taking video. So it means perhaps that it was deliberate on their part. They don't really care whether there would be a collision. But for the Philippine government, we are preventing such collision from happening. Around 7 in the morning, MRB 4409 was already separated from Unai-Zamay. You know, for every Coast Guard vessel, our concept of operation is that one Coast Guard will escort one Unai-Zamay. And based on our experience for the past so many months already, the concept of operation for the Chinese Coast Guard is for them to separate the Philippine Coast Guard vessel from the resupply boat. In this particular photo, you can see how they corralled MRB 4409 for them to separate it from Unai-Zamay 1. It is worth mentioning that in this time, 7:50, the Chinese Coast Guard vessel was also successful in separating Onaiza May 4 from the escort vessel of Onaiza May. The escort vessel of Onaiza May is MRB 4407. You can see from this photo that the Chinese maritime forces have become successful in separating it, deploying as many as 2 Chinese Coast Guard vessels and 4 Chinese maritime militia for them to separate these 2 boats. As a result of that, Onaiza May, when due to her seamanship skills as well, she was able to get out of the situation of being trapped by these Chinese Coast Guard vessels. So from there, she managed to get out of being trapped and decided to sail on her way proceeding to Ayungin Shoal. This video is very important for us to know because right after she was separated from Onaiza May, that's the time that she was already completely separated by this Chinese maritime militia, even doing dangerous maneuver to move further Onaiza May from the Philippine Coast Guard vessel. And right after this, the escort vessel of Onaiza May, MRB 4407, is still wanting to get out of being corralled and trapped by this Chinese Coast Guard vessel. But it was very difficult for MRB 4407. That's why they were separated. Since they were separated, the Philippine Coast Guard is no longer there to ensure the security and safety of Onaiza May 4. That's why she has to be subject to water cannoning of these 2 Chinese Coast Guard vessels. Because most of the time, our media friends would always ask, if the Philippine Coast Guard vessel has the duty to escort the Onaiza May, where is the Philippine Coast Guard vessel during this time? That's why I showed the 3 previous slides to show that the MRB 4407 was completely corralled and she's no longer have the ability to maneuver to support Onaiza May 4. And the water cannoning of 21551 and other Chinese Coast Guard did not stop until 8:15. And besides from the water cannoning, Chinese Coast Guard also did dangerous maneuver that almost had a collision with this Onaiza May 4. As a result of the water cannoning, which was already narrated by the AFP spokesperson, the Philippine Coast Guard vessels MRB 4407 received a radio call from Onaiza May 4 that 4 of the crew have been injured. That's why the Philippine Coast Guard launched a rigid hull inflatable boat to provide medical assistance to those injured personnel. Around 7:52 in the morning, Onaiza May 1 was the only successful resupply boat that entered the lagoon of Ayungin Shoal. It is also worth mentioning that despite of the damage that Onaiza May has sustained because of the water cannoning and the near collision, and they know for a fact that the Onaiza May have also injured personnel on board, the Chinese Coast Guard still never hesitated to launch their own rigid hull inflatable boat or their patrol boat coming from 21551 and circle around Onaiza May 4, trying to document as if we are the ones doing illegal activities in our own exclusive economic zone. Around 9:56 in the morning, Onaiza May 4 has decided to abort the mission proceeding to Ayungin Shoal, but to proceed back to Ulugan Bay and it was escorted by BRP Sindangan. At 12:50 in the afternoon, Onaiza May 1 already exited Ayungin Shoal, and as you can see from the photo, she was still being shadowed by Chinese maritime militia vessels. At 7:30 in the morning of 6, I think there's a wrong slide. But these are the Chinese Coast Guard vessels that actively block, conducted dangerous maneuver and dangerous tactics as we carry out these resupply operations in Ayungin Shoal. Chinese Coast Guard vessel 3305, 5201, and the 21-5 series, 21551, 21555, and 21556. These are also the notorious and active Chinese maritime militia that actively supported the blocking and dangerous maneuver of the Chinese Coast Guard vessels. On the part of the Philippine Coast Guard, we monitored PLA Navy vessel 530, PLA Navy vessel 164, and the PLA Navy helicopter with the tail number 36. All in all, the Chinese maritime militia vessels that we physically monitored, there were 12 of them, and 6 were monitored via AIS, and 5 Chinese Coast Guard vessels, and 3 People's Liberation Army Navy, and the PCG Hello. That ends my briefing, and maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Commodore Tariela. Up next, we have the Ambassador, Teresita Daza. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon to everyone in this hot afternoon. Yesterday, another incident again occurred within the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, more particularly in Ayungin Shoal. Chinese actions resulted in a collision between a Philippine Coast Guard ship and a Chinese Coast Guard ship. The irresponsible use of water cannons damaged a Philippine supply vessel and caused minor injuries among some of the Filipino crew that was doing a routine rotation and resupply mission to BRP Sierra Madre. The Philippine Embassy in Beijing has demarched their counterparts in the Chinese Ministry of Foreign Affairs yesterday. The department also lodged another diplomatic protest against the Chinese side by summoning the Chinese embassy also yesterday afternoon. Ayungin Shoal is part of Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone and Continental Shelf. The Philippines has sovereign rights and jurisdiction over it. As a low-tide elevation, Ayungin Shoal can neither be the subject of sovereignty claim, nor is it capable of appropriation under international law. The Philippines' resupply missions to BRP Sierra Madre are part of routine operations in line with domestic and international law. This lawful activity is well within the exercise of Philippine rights within our EEZ. We have not added anything to our normal or routine RORE missions. Our conduct over our EEZ remains the same. The Philippines has made sincere efforts to implement leaders' instructions to lessen tensions and have our foreign ministers and foreign ministries hold discussions. China, however, has made references to supposed agreements or arrangements out of these discussions. The Philippines has not entered into any agreement. I repeat, the Philippines has not entered into any agreement abandoning its sovereign rights and jurisdiction over its EEZ and continental shelf, including in the vicinity of the Ayungin Shoal. China's unlawful exercise of maritime law enforcement powers, interference with Philippine rotation and resupply missions, or any other activity that infringes upon Philippine sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the Ayungin Shoal are violations of international law, particularly the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. we continue to call on China to cease and desist from undertaking actions that violate Philippine sovereignty, sovereign rights and jurisdiction in the West Philippine Sea, and undermine the mutual trust and confidence that should underpin bilateral relations. We thank the international community for their continued expression of support to the Philippines and the defense of the international order based on international law. The Department of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of the Philippines remains committed to pursue its mandate of protecting and upholding the Philippine legal maritime entitlements in the West Philippine Sea. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, ma'am. And that closes all the presentation from our resource persons. At this moment, we will be opening the floor for questions from our media friends. Once again, we would like to remind everyone that we will be only limiting one question per media agency. We have here from Reuters News.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Reza. The State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller made a statement overnight that the Philippines and the U.S. are talking and discussing what he described as provocative actions of China in Ayungin Shoal. What were discussed, and did the discussions include invoking the Mutual Defense Treaty, because the statement of the past statements of the State Department has been quite clear that Article 4 of the MDP includes that any attack that extends to the Coast Guard will activate such provision.
On your first question, I do not have at this moment a readout of what was discussed, but suffice it to say there's continuing and ongoing discussion and consultation between the U.S. and the Philippines on a number of areas of cooperation, including defense cooperation. So in terms of specific readout, I do not have it at this moment. In terms of the second question, in terms of the MDT, I defer to our NSC representative to respond to it.
Okay. The invocation of the Mutual Defense Treaty is subject to consultations between the Philippines and the United States. And given that it is subject to high-level consultations, the National Task Force West Philippine Sea cannot make any comment as of this time.
Next.
What's the scope of the consultations, and is there, or what are the ways forward that you are looking at in terms of more concrete support, perhaps on the part of the U.S. based on the incident that happened in the West Philippines?
Mikel, I'll get back to you on your question as soon as I get more information on it. Yeah?
Up next, we have from AFP News.
In reference to the statement by the State Department mentioned by my colleague, it refers to the 4 injured service personnel. I wanted to know, and the military spokeswoman referred to these 4 injured people as personnel from our side. Is that right? I wanted to know from which service do they belong. Are they Navy men?
Yes, now our operations there, the RORE, the rotation and resupply, is a military operation, as our Coast Guard has said. No, we are conducting routine morale and welfare activities. No? So our troops are stationed in Ayungin Shoal, so we have to give them provisions, and thus our personnel will be part of the crew of the vessels that were involved.
Meaning our military, Philippine military?
Yes, Philippine military. As to the composition of the cruiser, we cannot divulge for operational matters.
One follow-up question.
As a follow-up to that one, since we have had this resupply issues, we've had them forever, but we're not publicizing them before because we had a different strategy. Could you tell us how many service personnel have become casualties of this Chinese attacks?
Sa ngayon pa lang, it's the first time that we have minor injuries that were reported during these missions. But as I said, we cannot divulge how many are in composition of every crew.
There was a laser attack.
Yes, but there was no impending these ones are minor injuries. The ones were temporary blindness that was caused.
And we say 6.
It depends upon the answer. It wasn't declared as this was a lasting impact on this too, sir.
I think we have a statement here from Commodore Trinidad.
Yes, I have with us Commodore Trinidad po is the spokesperson of the Philippine Navy in terms of issues regarding the West Philippine Sea.
Yes, your question was on the 4 Navy personnel were injured, although minor injuries. So far, these are the only casualties or injuries we have incurred in all our missions in the West Philippine Sea for the Philippine Navy. And I believe also for the entire armed forces. Though the laser pointing incident was on a Coast Guard ship, and I believe they suffered temporary blindness.
Yes, sir.
Next we have from GMA News. Again, sir, 1 question and 1 follow-up question, sir.
Good afternoon, gentlemen and Ambassador. Sir, based on the discussions, we note that while all of these very aggressive maneuvers by the Chinese were ongoing, sir, may dalawa tayong Navy ship na naka-standby sa tabi. Anong threshold? Kailan sila makikialam? Kailan sila magsasabing sasagipin na nila ang mga kapwa Pilipino na ginigipit in the future? So, is there a protocol in place? Because people might be asking, andun yung mga barkong pandigma, but they did not do anything. Sir.
Yes, there are protocols in place. We call them the rules of engagement. This governs the actions of the Navy and the armed forces, depending on the situation as they escalate. The commander of Western Command was aboard on May 4. He was there to supervise. Although this was a tactical action, it could have strategic implications. So when the stakes are high, our senior commanders have a hands-on approach to naval and military operations. He had the call when to bring in the gray ships or the Navy ships.
At that point, hindi pa kailangan, sir.
Yes, because they didn't come in. So I surmise that it was his call as being the commander on the ground.
Follow up na lang.
Sorry.
Point 2, follow up lang.
Sorry, sir, we have to move on to the next agency.
Move on.
We have from AP News.
I yield.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir and ma'am. For Ambassador Dasa, ma'am, last January 17, representatives of China in the Philippines met in Shanghai and forged an understanding or an agreement to lower tensions and some called it to de-escalate. In light of what happened yesterday, is this understanding or agreement still on the table? And if it's still on the table, what's the rationale for holding on to a policy or agreement that continues to result in, damages to Philippine ships and injuries to Filipino crew members?
Trim, I'd like to repeat, relative to both the Shanghai and others, and as it always mentioned that there are agreements, the Philippines has not entered into any agreement that will relinquish or abandon our sovereign rights and jurisdiction over the EEZ and continental shelf, including WION Shoal. There's also no temporary special arrangement existing between the Philippines and China with regard to Ayungin Shoal. So this narrative keeps on being repeated that we've made promises and we've broken promises, we've entered arrangements, and that we've actually are not following into certain agreements. So we're saying clearly that we have not entered into any agreement that will abandon our sovereign rights and jurisdiction over our EZ. But what they may be mentioning, though, is after the Shanghai, during the Shanghai meeting of January 17, clearly the two parties agreed that we have to calmly deal with incidents in the South China Sea and that we have to go through this through diplomacy. Second, that also that there should be efforts on both parts, from both sides, to reduce tensions in the area. And that we've agreed that continuous dialogue is important to keep peace and stability at the sea. And if you note in the press statement that was released after, we made mention that we were looking into upgrading the communication mechanism between the two sides. So if you're on the three scores alone, I don't think the Philippines has actually been remiss in continuing to pursue diplomacy and dialogue, and in terms of exerting all efforts necessary to reduce tension in the South China Sea. So in terms of your latter question, I think it becomes more important, at least from our perspective, to continue to talk and dialogue with them and to see where we can meet and actually have common grounds. But the President has always been very clear. Relative to our territory, we will not actually relinquish or abandon our territory. Not 1 inch, he has actually been repeatedly quoted. So this is something that we are pursuing. But at the same time, we will not also stop in terms of continuous dialogue, because what other options should be available if we do not do that from the department's perspective?
One follow-up. Yeah. To Commodore Trinidad, Sir, Admiral Carlos, a senior Navy official, was in UN Porno, and that was hit, and then that was damaged, and then there were 4 injuries. Can you tell us, why is it necessary for a senior Navy official to be in that ship, and how did what happened affect the mindset of the military? And additionally, for the first times now, we are hearing that Philippine Navy ships were in the area and PLA Navy ships were also there. What's the implication of this to possible, miscalculations when gray ships are present in one area of adversarial situation?
Allow me first to state that Onaizame 1, 2, 3, and 4 are Navy contracted ships. In running the operation, the resupply, we have a command and control team on the bridge of Onaizame. The bridge is the center of all activity when a ship is underway. The commander of Western Command was on the bridge of Onaizame 4. He was there when the windshield was shattered. He did not incur any injury. He was there to ensure that this tactical action will not spiral out of control, and it may have strategic implications. I mentioned earlier that when the stakes are high, it is a naval and a military practice for our commanders to lead from the front. Not only are you increasing the morale of the men, but you would like to be assured that in case of any untoward incident, it will not spiral out of control.
Yeah, just to add, Jim,
From ABS-CBN.
wait, let me just add, Jim, to our answer to this question. Both sides have mentioned that they want to de-escalate tensions. But unfortunately, we were also surprised about what happened there in Ayungin Shoal yesterday. Because we thought that we were turning the page already. So our call really is for the Chinese government to match their words with actions. Because they say they want to meet us halfway, they say they want a win-win solution, they say they want to steer a new course for Philippine and Chinese bilateral relations and resolve this matter of maritime issues in a peaceful manner. But we need to see these words translated into actions on the ground. But this, of course, will not stop the Philippines from continuing engaging with China. As the President has said repeatedly, even in the face of aggression and provocation, we'll have to engage and continue to talk to the PRC. No? So we are not closing our doors. Our desire is to keep engaging with them, but if China desires some improvement or progress in resolving this maritime dispute in a peaceful and orderly manner, we demand that they match their words with their actions.
Sir, good afternoon. Sir, we are already on our second year of implementing the Assertive Transparency Initiative, which we've seen has garnered the support of and the condemnation from the international community. But is this strategy, our transparency initiative strategy, enough when we put it against the more physical and aggressive tactics by China as seen in the recent mission?
Well, Bianca, first of all, we don't call it assertive transparency. As what with ADG Malaya has keep on mentioning, we don't have to be very assertive for us to be transparent. What we're doing is that we just have a measured transparency. Now, if your question is, are we effective in attaining our objectives with the transparency strategy that we did launch since last year? I think for us to of the transparency strategy. I've been mentioning this a lot of times. The first one is for us to create awareness to the Filipino people. Right now, with the current survey result, they were saying that more than 70% now supports the approach of the Philippine government in the West Philippine Sea. Second objective of the transparency strategy is to rally support from the international community. We can know for a fact that more countries now are engaging our country, criticizing, condemning provocative actions of China, and also expressing their commitment to support the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines, to deepening the defense cooperation that we have. So, if we're going to measure it, how effective we are now, I think we have already gained the objectives, achieved the objectives, and accomplished it well. But if you're going to ask how the transparency strategy affect the behavior of China, I think that is not for us to answer. Definitely, nobody would really say that whatever strategy you're going to carry out, whether diplomatic, whether you talk to them or whatever, they would always choose to do provocative actions in the West Philippine Sea. But we are hoping that with the international community's criticism and condemnation of their illegal acts and provocative behavior, we can be able to make China modify their behavior and choose to abide with international law and ensure the status quo and maintain the global order that we are all enjoying.
Yes, also, the South China Sea issue and challenging issue, and there's no one fix. You have a strategy, but there's none. It has to be a collection of efforts to address it across different fronts, whether it be in terms of diplomacy, public diplomacy, law enforcement, and regulation. There has to be a collective effort on the part of the country. Point one. The second point that I'd like to stress is the South China Sea issue is not just an issue that concerns the Philippines. It is also an issue that concerns our neighbors and the entire world. When countries, for example, believe in a rules-based international order to act, to expose and oppose these moves, and to call back all countries to the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, as well as the 2016 Arbitral Tribunal Award, that actually is a legal and binding award that actually also already said that China's 9-dash line has no legal basis. China claims the entire South China Sea, including parts of the high seas in the Chinese waters. This actually overturns centuries of development of international law, culminating in the 1982 UNCLOS, the universal and unified character to which countries are actually accepted by the international countries. So we, on our part, should actually seek the support of like-minded countries that believe that the rules-based international law is something that we all should apply, and that not one country should actually determine what law would apply in a particular region, and not one country's interpretation of that law should apply to all, and to those countries in the region. So I think we should also widen our perspective. Yes, it concerns us, but we should also say that it does not just concern the Philippines, it concerns other countries, because it's already a question of whether we're observing the rules-based international order.
Up next, we have from PTV4, ma'am, at the back.
Hello po. For my question, maybe AFP can answer. Regarding lang po sa USS Mobile LCS-26, do they have any role po ba on the recent RORE mission? Kasi nakita daw po yung USS Navy ship last Monday near the vicinity of Sabina Shoal.
We have to take into consideration that this happened in the Philippines territorial EEZ. So these are open waters. So they are exercising their right towards freedom of navigation. So their presence there could mean that they were there for any reason that deemed necessary for them.
Okay po, thank you.
Up next, we have from IBC News.
Good afternoon, good officials. Earl Tobias, IBC News 13. Yung sa akin lang po, kanina I covered former Associate Justice of Supreme Court, Antonio Carpio, nasabi niya na ang China nga daw ay nagkakaroon ng PR war, or they trying to win the West Philippine Sea without firing a single bullet by misinformation and disinformation. And evidently po, under the published in the Foreign Ministry's spokesperson site ng China, they called Philippines as the one who was defined or bordered by treaties. And sinabi rin po nila, on their word, the Philippines arbitrarily went beyond its territorial scope to set up the so-called Kalayaan Island Group, which has violated China's territorial sovereignty. This is illegal, null, and void. Ano pong reaction natin sa pilit nilang pagsasabi na null and void ng ating 2016 claim na nanalo po tayo dito sa ating sariling teritoryo? Thank you.
China has a lot of narratives, and we really have to be very careful, because if we mount it and we give them the platform to actually present their narratives, more people will believe in it. And that's the reason why the government is earnest in trying to present its position, and that's the reason why the National Task Force has actually come and tried to present the perspective relative to what happens in the South China Sea. I'll give you one narrative. They keep on debunking the arbitral award, and they say that the arbitral award is supposed to, because their claim is based on historic rights. They keep on saying that they own the waters because of historic rights, but the award has already debunked it. That the claim based on historic rights is both illegal and void. Then they say, because they did not participate, and because of that, then there's no basis in terms of the award. But clearly, they were given the opportunity, and the arbitral award also made mention that they were in any dispute. For example, I'll state here, it's provided in Article 9 of the Annex 2, which provides that if one party to the dispute does not appear before the arbitral award or fails to defend its case, the other party may request the tribunal to continue the proceeding and make its award, which is what the Philippines did. The absence of a party or failure of a party to defend its case shall not constitute a bar to the proceedings, which is exactly what happened. Before making its award, the arbitral tribunal satisfied that it had jurisdiction over the dispute and that the claim is well-founded in fact and law. And then they say that, of course, they own the entire area, that the fishing activities by Chinese fishing boats and waters, what they're doing in terms of regulation and enforcement, are legitimate and lawful and beyond reproach. But we're saying that would be legitimate if they were in their EEZ. But they're not in their EEZ. They're a big distance away from the EEZ. there are in our EEZ, and because of that, it is us who will determine what we will do in our EEZ, is it not? So there are many narratives that come out, and it's important for all of us in the Philippines, from government to the private sector and to the media, to actually question the narratives that are being posted on us and raised and actually repeated in the hope that it will garner support.
One follow-up question, sir.
Following that up lang po, in the words of former Justice Carpio, in relevance nga po sa disinformation na pilit na ginagamit ng China against us, sinabi niya na the only choice we have the support of the world because we have the arbitral award. If we can convince our allies to lobby for us, specifically in UN, China should be condemned strongly. Statement lang rin po natin.
We are working very hard. We are working very hard to seek the support of the international community. Kanina it was asked, is the transparency policy just our single strategy in resolving this problem? No, it's not. No? The transparency policy is just one aspect of what we do. No, and we thank the international community, particularly the countries that have spoken in favor of the Philippines. But there are other countries that we also need to talk to and seek their support. And that is precisely what government is doing right now. Through the transparency policy, we are showing to the world what's happening